The next free pick for week 2 is for the Kentucky at Florida minus 13.5. Okay, so this is going to be the thinnest one of all my picks, but I mean, you're just going to have to trust me on this. Yes, I know Kentucky. Kentucky, I don't know what in the hell they -4 in turnovers last week, and they still won by 15 points. I mean, but Central Michigan, very, 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 very poor team in Central Michigan, very young team. Central Michigan is opening the season on the road, not necessarily the best for a young team. For them to, win the turnover battle, they just struggled to move the ball. But okay, but here's the reasoning why. Okay, Florida. Obviously, Florida, there was a lot of problems last year. I mean, they had suffered a lot of injuries, and they had 10 guys suspended from the team right before football camp even started. And some of those guys were supposed to be starters and were supposed to apply or be impactful players for this team. So that's a lot that they missed. But guess what? That gave experience to guys that they weren't planning on getting experience last year. Those guys are now able to come in and play, and they're going to be able to play with their ears on fire. Dan Mullen, he's from the SEC. He doesn't need to adapt. He knows the Florida-Kentucky rivalry. He was he was the QB coach at Florida. Everybody loves him there. He understands this game. But Florida, 19 returning starters, 112 offensive line starts. So they shouldn't have any problem getting the ball going, moving the ball. They should finally have an offense. I hope so. We've been looking for an offense in Florida for years. Every head coaching hire is supposed to be the resurrector of the offense, but it's been pretty stagnant down there since Urban Meyer left. Anyway, here's a fun stat. Florida is 9-2 in the last 11 against the spread versus Kentucky, and the two that they didn't cover were games that were in Kentucky. So you get the home field advantage there. I mean, Kentucky does have a good home field advantage. And finally, so Kentucky QBs. They last week, very very first snap any quarterback on the Kentucky roster had in an FBS game happened for the first time last week. So that was a home game, and they were -4 in turnovers against Central Michigan. Now, Central Michigan's a good turnover team. They were top 5 in the nation last year in turnover margin. But this is Florida, this is SEC football, and this is on the road. You do not have a rookie quarterback making his first start after his first game of playing on the road in Florida and in the swamp and expect good results. You just do not do that. Florida has dominated this series for a reason. They're head and shoulders talent-wise above it. Just because they've had coaches that have had a hard time exploiting that talent or getting the best out of that talent on the field doesn't mean that they don't have the talent. Florida is a rich recruiting ground. They have the talent there. They get those guys in there. They get the blue chippers in there every year. Big signing classes, SEC East. Florida could be dangerous this year, especially with 19 returning starters and that offensive line experience. Felipe Franks gets a little bit of time to make some decisions. Maybe he makes good decisions for once. Maybe Dan Mullen teaches him something. I don't know. You just have to believe in this one. You just have to take Florida and you have to lay the chalk. Anything under 2 touchdowns is fantastic. So 14 or less. Florida -13.5 is the play. College football week 2, Memphis -6.5 at Navy. Navy just coming off a long road trip. It's a long way out there to Hawaii. And that's even if you're flying from LA. Navy's got to fly from Maryland. So first of all, you go Maryland to California, California to Hawaii. You can do direct, but that's long as hell, right? And it's hard traveling east. It's easy to travel west. They traveled west and they got their ass kicked. Now they got to turn around and come back home, play an even more potent offense. I don't know if they got it, and I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. That's just too much. I think it's going to be too difficult for them. Anything Memphis under a touchdown should be a play. Memphis didn't have much of a challenge. Yes, it was Mercer, but they put up over 700 yards of offense against Mercer. That's pretty spectacular. I don't care who you're playing. If you can put up 700 yards of offense, that's pretty spectacular. But But the important thing is here is to look at that is not how many yards that they put away, but the reps that they got, the backups. So they were able to get some experience into their two deep, but also because they had a poor FCS team to kick off the schedule, they were able to devote some of that more earlier time to defending the option and working against the option. But hey, it's not like they're new to facing the option. They play Navy every year. They face the option. They're used to playing the option. They'll be prepared for it. So Navy last week, I talked about Navy getting smoked. I mean, so they allowed 436 passing yards last week, and I talk about this because Navy, obviously they're an option team, so it's not as if their defense gets many chances to defend against the pass when they're playing. I mean, if they're a scout team defense, maybe, but those are your backup guys. Those aren't necessarily your starters. So your scout team defense, I mean, your backups, they learn playing against the option. That's what I'm trying to say. So like the first couple years that they spend on campus, they're defending the option. Then all of a sudden they got to play games, and now they got to defend the pass. That's not something that they're cut out to. They're not used to. So Memphis, and with their 428 passing yards last week, they should be able to hit those numbers again. I mean, if you look at, this is their third-year head coach. I like third-year head coaches. Big fan of them. They got 15 returning starters. They got 109 career starts on the offensive line. Yeah, they lost their quarterback, and yes, they lost their number one wide receiver. But there's just so much experience there, and this offense is so explosive that they're not going to have any issues. Navy might be able to score some points. Yeah, Memphis did allow some, have some defensive struggles the last few years. And, Navy's probably going to score some points. They scored some points against Hawaii too, but the problem is they didn't score enough points. And if you can't keep the other team out of the end zone, how are you going to beat them? So Memphis on the road, laying anything under a touchdown. Right now, -6.5. Memphis -6.5. For the final free pick of week 2, I'm heading out west to the Pac-12. USC travels to Stanford. Stanford's laying 5.5. I think obviously I'm going to take the home team here. I'm going to lay the points. Stanford's, to me, they're looking for some revenge. That's reason number one. They lost 2 times to USC last year. Once on the road and during the regular season, and then in the Pac-12 Conference Championship game. So 2 losses last year. They did cover the spread in the Conference Championship game, and they've actually Stanford's 4-1 against the spread in the last 5 against USC. That's a trend. That's a pretty solid trend right there. The another thing is USC's defense gave up 308 rushing yards last week to UNLV in week 1. 308 yards to a team, UNLV, there's not a very good team. Hoping they're fighting to make a bowl game this year for like the first time in ever. So if the fact that they can run for 308 yards against this Trojan defense, I can only imagine what Bryce Love can do against them. He's probably licking his lips. He's got one of the top 5 offensive lines in the nation to run behind. I know that San Diego State really packed the box on them, and Bryce Love only got 29 yards on 18 carries last week. But that's because obviously they packed the box. San Diego State wanted KJ Costello to beat them, and that's exactly what he did. I mean, the guy went 21 of 31 for 332 yards and 4 touchdowns. They didn't need Bryce Love last week to win. They had Costello's arm, and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. He was a man on fire out there catching the ball. So, look for that to turn around this week, though. Bryce Love, he'll probably rush for a couple hundred yards in this game. That wouldn't surprise me. JT Daniels, the true freshman, looked good in USC. Looked better than I expected. But, it's his first road start, and he's going into hostile territory, playing against Stanford as a true freshman. That I don't see that playing out too well for them, especially against this defense that only allowed 263 yards total offense last week against San Diego State. 113 through the air and 150 on the ground. So good solid defense in Stanford. It'll be a much better test for them for USC this week than what UNLV was in last week. And it's not like they had. They won the game, and it was a pretty solid win, convincing win against UNLV, but. You look at how the drives went. They struggled to finish drives, so they ended up kicking 5 field goals. You got to finish those drives. That's only 15 points. Those 5 35 to 15 points, that 20-point difference right there. That could have lost them the game. It could have cost them the game. They got lucky that it was only UNLV, especially if you're giving up 308 rushing yards a game. You're lucky to win that one. So take Stanford. I think Stanford blows them out of the water. Won't be close. Anything under a touchdown you should be drooling over. I think anything up to 10 is good. So Stanford -5.5. Go get them this week.